Welcome to another conversation in People in Fundraising. This podcast features interviews with nonprofit professionals who discuss their career journeys, lessons learned, and enthusiasm for working in fundraising. And here is your host, the founder of People in Fundraising, Tim Wilson.
Hi, everyone, and welcome to another conversation in the People in Fundraising webcast series. We're now in season 3. It's been over 2 years since I launched this to spotlight people very much like our guest today, Dominique Calixte, and she is going to tell us a little bit about herself in a moment. But I just want to mention that Dominique and I got connected through a season 1 guest, Jessica McNeill, and I appreciate Jessica's support of this podcast by giving me opportunity to talk to other great people like yourself. So Dominique, tell us about yourself, please.
Yeah, super excited to be here. Thank you, Jessica, because you're probably listening for invite or suggesting that I get invited. I am currently the Director of Development at Big Sister Greater Boston. We are a mentoring nonprofit here in the Greater Boston area. We serve 69 cities and towns in the Greater Boston area. So naturally, I live in the Greater Boston area. If you are wondering, go Celtics, because we are in the finals right now. Big sports fan. So I might drop a little sports reference here and there. But yeah, so I've been in fundraising now. I'm wrapping my brain around it, but I think it's been 10 years. And it's been a whirlwind of a ride. I've primarily been in the fundraising space. And I'm super excited to talk about my experience.
Dynamite, thank you. It looks like you've got perhaps Celtic green on your nail polish. There you go.
I do. Diehard Celtics fan here.
That's awesome. Oh, wonderful. Well, thank you for that intro about yourself, Dominique. And I'm excited to learn more about this. Your career. You mentioned you've been in fundraising for about 10 years. So that's great. What I often do to start the conversation going is I just have the guests talk a little bit about how they entered the nonprofit world, and I'd love to hear your story.
Insert right here at this moment, the gift of Dionne Warwick, not Dionne Warwick. It's some old 80s artist that surprise, surprise. I did not know I was going to be a fundraiser. I did not know. I had no idea. When I was in college, I was a senior, and I was like, I just need one internship to graduate.
Oh.
I was like, I will do anything. I was convinced I was going to be in policy. I was a sociology major with a public administration minor, all routes to being in policy.
Yes.
At one point, people were like, you're going to take your LSAT, you're going to go to law school. I was like, clearly that did not happen, or did not happen yet.
Sure. Yeah.
I won't say never, but I needed that one internship, and I ended up getting paired with a mentor in a leadership program who I credit all the time. His name is Bobby Gondola, and he's still in the fundraising space out in Rhode Island. And he was paired with me to be my mentor for this leadership program. And I was just rambling as college students do. And he was like, you need an internship? Come and work for me for your internship. I was like, oh, solid. I don't even have to go do an interview. He was like, no, you're good.
Wow.
Had no idea what I was signing up for. I was just like, yeah, you said Director of Development. So I in my mind, because I started off as a business major when I went to college. Every college student goes through their share of concentration and major changes. But I was like, maybe I'm getting back into the business world. Who knows?
Yeah.
I got there, and it was the first day of my internship, I was intrigued with development because I walked in and I didn't think anything of it. I was just like, yeah, I'm walking into the first day of my internship. I'm dressed in my oversized business casual at the time. And people start freaking out when I say that I am here to see Bobby Gondola.
Hmm.
They were like moving around. They were like grabbing together packets, and they're like, "Oh my God, we didn't know he had a guest coming in." There was a production. I will also say part of why there was a production, and I now credit this as I fell into um, fundraising, is as I was walking into the organization, one of the students was walking out, and we like bumped each other, and I fell.
Oh no.
Like I fell into the I stumbled right into Europe Providence, and I was like, oh, like I'm fine, like it wasn't a big deal, but like so there was like, oh, we didn't know Bobby was having a guest come in, and his guest fell. It's this whole production. They were
Oh
like, oh,
goodness.
and I was like, I don't know what's going on. And I just recall getting a text from Bobby, like, how are you late to your first day of your internship? And I was like, I'm here.
Yeah.
I am here. I am sitting down and I'm being taken care of. I
Yeah.
don't know when I see you, but I'll see you when I see you. And he walks out of his office like, why didn't you tell me my intern was here? And everyone just freezes.
Oh boy.
They're like, oh, like I
Okay.
was like, I need to know what you do because I got like the red carpet rolled out for me. And it was in that moment, I was like, I am so intrigued by this and like
Sure.
also perplexed because some of the things I was like, you should just like be a nice human because not because you
Yes.
thought I was like a major donor.
Right. Right. That you're the first guest that has literally fallen into development. So I like that anecdote.
Yes, I literally fell in. And so that was like my taste to development.
Yeah.
And I was like, and ended the internship. And I was like, thanks, Bobby. I get to graduate. Right. And
Yeah.
he's like, so you're going to go into development. I was like, joke's on you. I signed up to be a teacher. And I still remember the day I called Bobby at the end of my teaching fellowship and said, I'm going back to development. And he said, I already knew you would.
Oh wow.
Yeah. And
Wow.
so he was like, you just needed to like make sure, but like I knew you were going to like go into development at some point. You were too curious. You were like, you pay attention to the details about the donors and like learning little facts about people. Like you're a natural development person. I was like,
Awesome.
okay, like sure, you knew, but I didn't. And so I ended up at a small school out in Lawrence, an all-girls school, and that was like my first like real official development job
Okay.
outside of being an intern for the fabulous Bobby Gondola, because I'm sure he will also watch this. Um, he's still someone who I'm connected with to this day. I talk to him every so often just to check in. And he's been so like incremental in my career as a development person, kind of just being my cheerleader. Um, and like telling me like, you know what to do.
Yes.
like like any like development person, I do get my imposter syndrome stints and I'm like, Bobby, what do I do? And I have a few people who I can reach out to for that, which I really do appreciate. And so like he's helped me navigate like, well, I feel like I've grown enough here, but I still want to do this kind of work. What should I be looking for in a job description? um and like I know I'm passionate about these kind of pillars of service. Like how do I remain in those pillars of service and still be able to branch out? So
Yeah.
I've had conversations like that with him. I've had conversations like that with many of mentors um that just continue to support me in my career. And now, apparently, I'm like a development professional that people want to talk to. Like, hey, like they want your insight. I'm like, cool.
That is wonderful. I really appreciate that story and the depth of it that you share with us, Dominique, because it does speak about the value of mentoring and someone more seasoned seeing a spark of skill, curiosity, personality that he didn't compel you during your internship to get right into development, but he really kept you in mind and thought, yeah, she'll come back at some point, and gave you that sort of leash to go experience, teaching, and that's terrific. I wonder, have you been able to sort of emulate, kind of flipping the tables, emulate some of what Bobby did for other younger development people?
Yeah, no, I mean, surprise, surprise. You can like I feel like I'm gonna say that a lot. Just insert the gift every time. Or imagine he's inserting the gift every time. Surprise, surprise. I love mentorship. I work at Big Sister because I value mentorship so much.
Yeah.
I had people like Bobby, I had Elsa, who was a big help to me. Lots of people who were just cheering me on. And so I try and do that myself in a number of spaces.
Yeah.
Um, I'm a part of Women in Development Greater Boston. And so I'm always connecting with different development professionals through that. And I think that oftentimes people think of mentorship as like, you need someone senior to you
Yeah.
who's going to like provide you all this wisdom and insight. Well, I believe that there are multiple forms of mentorship, and I'm a big fan of peer mentorship. Like, we are at
Mhm.
the same place and we are able to support each other. And I know that you've talked to Mariama, like she's someone who I consider a peer mentor. The two of us kind of like float back and forth
Yeah.
and talk through what it is that we're going through in our careers. And then at the same time, because apparently I'm somebody that gets talked about and when in development spaces, people then tend to come up to me and say, like, I would love for you to meet this person who's entering the development space and have those conversations with them. And I will always do that, especially because one of the things that like I really value about the being able to be mentored by Bobby, being able to be mentored by someone like Elsa is I didn't know development existed before I
Same.
walked into Europe, right?
Yeah.
It's not, no fifth grader, or not even fifth grade, in kindergarten, when they ask you what you want to be when you grow up, nobody is raising their hand and saying, I want to be a development professional.
Right.
Like, and still to this day, when I'm explaining to my mother what I do for work, she doesn't quite understand. And
Yeah.
like, my dad would go around and tell his coworkers, I don't know what she does. She begs people for money. Like, so I like being able to provide mentorship back to people who are just entering their careers and like navigating some of the same things that I was navigating.
Yeah.
It's only going to allow for us to bring in new development professionals that are going to have a variety of backgrounds. Long goes the time that every development professional looked exactly the same.
Sure.
Um, there is so much diversity in this field, and I want to make sure that it continues to grow.
Absolutely. Yeah, that's a well put point. Thank you. I'm curious, Dominique, you mentioned as you did your introduction about the reach of the Big Sister Association, about almost 70 municipalities, towns in Greater Boston. I'd love to learn, are you working like hybrid, and how often do you have to go out to, that volume of communities to be on site with the Big Sisters, please?
Yeah, no, great question. So, in my role as director of development, I am not always working directly with our big sisters. So, I am working with our board, our auxiliary boards, and our major donors and whatnot. So, I don't get to go to all 69 cities and
Yeah,
towns, but no, and like while our map spreads to all 69 cities or towns, we are actively working towards being better representatives in every one of our cities and towns. So
mhm,
we are what we're doing this year is what we're calling it Big Sister on the Move, and we are trying to make sure that people are seeing us in the various places
yeah,
so that there's awareness that there's this resource out there for girls and for folks who identify with sisterhood. In terms of like how we are working, we are a hybrid model. So
okay,
uh, I go into the office once or twice a week. I try and, prioritize when I'm in the office because our offices are downtown. So I prioritize making sure that if I know I have like a corporate partner that's in the area, I will prioritize making sure that I try and schedule my visit with them on a day that I happen to be in the office.
yeah.
Um, there's a lot of balance now in this new hybrid world
Sure.
that I always I like I always joke when I talk to like my supervisors and like other people in the space. I was like, hybrid is very hard for me
Mm,
because the way my brain works, I'm just like, and it's easy for me to get all over the place. And so really like leaning into systems has been
mm.
like a big thing for me in the last few years and really figuring out the systems that work.
Sure. Yeah, yeah. Very good. Yeah, thank you for that explanation. Um, I want to pivot back to something you talked about before that last question about, the need to continually support, people coming into the industry, and in particular, having greater representation of backgrounds, walks of life, diversity. And in my day job, I'm a prospect researcher, so I often, kind of put those internet sleuthing skills to work as I'm drafting questions for my guests. And on your LinkedIn, if I can quote this really quick and get into the question, please. It notes that you, quote, have an interest in helping to activate millennials as change makers through philanthropy and effective DEI practice in the fundraising space. So, really exciting, totally well needed in our profession. And my question related to your bio, about a year ago, the Chronicle of Philanthropy noted that millennials had the biggest increase in giving among generations, 40% more in 2022 compared to their generation's giving in 2016. So, what about your experience as a millennial yourself and as a rising nonprofit leader with this interest in activating millennials as change makers and with the DEI effective practice lens has helped you to advance your interests, please?
Yeah, I mean, I think the big part of it for me with activating millennials is shifting the narrative. I think for a really long time, folks like, and it's still to this day, like, I'm a millennial, I still get this. People think that like we're still like fresh out of college, right?
Yeah.
And the longer the days of us being fresh out of college, I am now well into my career. As you said, I'm a rising star in the nonprofit space, which sounds a little weird for me. I'm like rising star, but I'm going to own it.
Yes.
Um, but people continue to think that millennials are young, naive, and they're not
Yeah.
active in their communities. And so as I was like growing as a development professional, I always would ask the question, well, what about this particular demographic? Especially at I primarily work at organizations that are dealing with youth and education. Those are things that millennials tend to be passionate about. There's data that shows that millennials tend to give towards education, tend to give towards youth development, mentoring, things of that nature.
Yeah.
No surprise, because those are the areas that I am
Yes.
interested in, and I'm a millennial, right?
Yeah.
And so it was always a demographic that folks were like, it's not their time to tap in with them yet. And I was
Mhm.
like, you're wrong.
Yeah.
Because for for the longest you talk about building relationships in development, which is 100% true, right? And so
Yeah.
some of your major donors, you started talking to them when they were about my age probably and started building those
Yeah.
relationships.
Yeah.
Things are changing, the demographics are shifting. We are the largest demographic in the workforce right now.
Mm.
We have all of our, our boomers.
Right.
I love all of you boomers. I feel like I'm an old soul most of the time, but they're retiring. They're moving
Yeah.
on. They're doing other things, and
Yeah.
so the decision makers at the companies that your nonprofits want to partner with are starting to look more like me, right?
Hmm.
They're starting to be my peers.
Yeah.
It like I'm constantly celebrating friends who are moving into VP roles and things of that nature. So like
Awesome.
we we are those decision makers at those companies that you want to work with. We are the folks that, are doing the bulk of the donating right now because we are in the workforce and we are actively engaged in communities.
Yes.
And the same goes with thinking about communities of color. Oftentimes, you're working in communities of color. I mean, we are Big Sister Greater Boston. Yes, we serve all ethnicities, but like a majority of our girls are coming from Black and Brown families in the center of Boston, right? And
Yeah.
so if you
Mhm.
are doing the work and partnering with these communities, your donor database shouldn't be the complete polar opposite. It
Yeah.
should be a myriad of people who are coming together who want to support and uplift this community. And that's how I look at development. And
Yeah.
so if you want for your development practices to be intentional and focused on DEI, you're going to start thinking about those demographics and how demographic shifts are shifting the way that you need to do your development work.
Yeah. So well said. Thank you. It's great to have your perspective on that. Um, and it goes right into my next question about representation. So I would love to hear, Dominique, um, anything you want to share with our audience about the importance of representation, both in your mentoring and maybe in your volunteer work, for other young women of color in philanthropy. I mean, you just mentioned with Big Sisters that a significant portion of the services and the people who benefit are, young girls, people, who have an affinity to sisterhood from Black and Brown community backgrounds. And so I would think that's a nice tie-in to that, what you were just mentioning.
Yeah, no, I mean, representation is something that like is near and dear to my heart because I know when I first entered into the development space, most of the development people that I was interacting with didn't look like me. And I felt very othered, right? And
Yeah.
then I started to intentionally look for folks in the space that looked like me. And I would lean on them and say, well, I'm about to go into this donor meeting.
Mm.
And this is the first time I'm going into this donor meeting. I know I'm going to be the only in the room. I'm anxious. I'm nervous. Uh,
Sure.
and like I could go to my friends who are also always going to be a great resource to me, but they're not in the space, right? And
Right.
so having someone who has probably sat in those same exact shoes and was like, yeah, I was scared too, and this is how I navigated it, helped me build my career. And
Yeah.
again, I think that it goes to show that when you pour into others, you're going to increase the chances of diversity in industries and sectors because you're building up a new narrative for what this
Mm.
looks like. Um,
Yeah.
I mean, when I first, like I said, when I first got into development, there weren't a ton of women that looked like me, but now I can actively rattle off a couple of folks without having to even really stretch my brain. And I
Sure.
love that.
Yeah.
And I love that people are looking to them for their expertise too, because that was the other piece of it. When it comes to being experts in the space, oftentimes when you are seeing women of color, men of color who are being talked to, it's not about them being experts in, annual fund or, plan giving. Their expertise is called upon specifically for, well, they have a diverse perspective. Let's talk to them about DEI. But now
Yeah.
we're starting to shift that and we're seeing that women of color, men of color, anybody who is, of a marginalized community, they're starting to be in those conversations around they are the experts in X, Y, or Z in the field.
Yeah. I have two follow-ups, if that's okay. So, one follow-up, specifically for your experience. You mentioned being nervous and anxious in the past going into meetings. Do you feel that some of that anxiety, nervousness, diminishes through experience over time? You're able to, you know, get into the
Yeah,
right headspace and confidence to be like, hey, that was me then, and now I'm super confident.
that's a great question. It's funny because yes and no. So yes, I go into meeting spaces with my donors and like I've done this before and I know that I could do it. I'm less uncomfortable about making an ask, right?
Yeah.
Um, I like at this point I've made many of X. I've been in the space for so long.
Yeah,
Um, but I also think that there's always a nervousness when it comes to development because nothing is guaranteed. And if
sure.
you're working at an organization that you're passionate about, you are going to really, really be anxious about making sure that, you know, you're building out sustainable relationships for your organization to, you know, I mean, my goal is that, you know, we whatever nonprofit I work at will eventually not exist because we fixed the problem, right? But
Right.
like
Yeah.
be I my goal before we fix the problem, my goal is to create sustainable relationships so that the organization can sustain itself so that it can fix the problem, right?
Right. Yes.
Um, so there's always a little bit of anxiety around that. And also on top of that, I am naturally an anxious person.
Yeah.
It's like an ongoing joke with many of my friends personally. They're like, Dominique, you're anxious, you're introverted, like and like clinically diagnosed as anxious. And like they're like, I
Oh.
just don't know how you go through your day.
Mm.
And I say that to say that like even if you're introverted or a super anxious person, you can still be a development person. I think
Yes.
everyone has this perception that a development person has to be like the person who really enjoys being around people. Quite frankly, I'd rather be at home reading a book than at like a social gathering for the evening.
Sure. Yes. I think a lot in our audience can relate to that. Yes. And my other follow-up question, because a couple of times you've talked about millennials being in positions of power now, and they are change agents, and you celebrating them. And it may be not just specifically in nonprofit, maybe you're talking about friends in other sectors as well, but specifically for nonprofit, as you maybe think to the future, what gives you optimism for our profession as it relates to millennials and people of color coming into senior positions? And you mentioned, also with relying on their expertise within the profession, not just going to people of color for their expertise in DEI, but plan giving, marketing, web content, things like that. Anything
Yeah,
along those lines?
yeah, I'm really excited about it. Like I said, I'm seeing a lot of my friends move into these positions of power, and it's an opportunity for one, there to be more authenticity in the workplace,
Yeah.
right? I think that one thing about a millennial and like millennials of all, like the elder millennials, you know, the millennials who are, I guess they're called millennials or they're in between, like
Hmm.
across the millennial demographic, one thing that we are certain to do is remain authentic to who we are.
Yeah.
I in my relationships with donors, I am never shying away from the fact that like I'm a Black woman, I have these interests, like I am leaning into that and building those genuine relationships.
Yeah.
And because more of us are moving into positions of power, that is kind of the norm now. It's like, yes, we are meeting in this professional, like we're conducting business, but I do get to be myself. And
Yeah.
I
Oh,
think
that's great.
that that's like being able to show up as yourself or at least try or show up as the way that you want to is a better way to put it is so important. And
Yeah.
as millennials, we are making that a priority. And I think that's also really great about, you know, going through the different like spaces that millennials are in and thinking about how we're starting to see shifts in how people are talking about things. Even
Mm.
in like when you're talking to your donors, there's a different shift in like, well, I have a focus on this because this is my authentic story. And so I want to make sure that like someone who's experiencing what I experience isn't, you know, thinking that that nothing is possible for them. And
Sure.
so really seeing like the shift in how like things are being talked about is really exciting for me.
Yeah.
Long go the days of your typical fundraising event focused on like millennials and fundraising and philanthropy. Long go the days of like we're going to these I say this all the time, these rubber chicken dinners that nobody wants to eat. We are now moving into a new era of events where, they're more of a cocktail reception style. I've been to so many cocktail reception style events. And while I still hate events, and somewhere someone's like, but she does events all the time. Yes, I don't love events. And I
Right.
make that very known. But I think that with the shift in like them not being so like, we're going to sit down to this dinner and then we're going to hear this program, and it's more of a like connection point for the for folks who are engaged with your organization. I think those are shifts that are happening because millennials are starting to move into positions of power.
Yeah, and that goes so nicely to what you mentioned about, writing the new narrative. The old narrative worked for that time and that place, and this is how we are going to write the narrative now. So very cool. I would love to know, Dominique, any meaningful moments that stand out to you specifically with the Big Sister Association of Greater Boston, directly impacting the lives of people in the community you serve, please.
Yeah. I love the moments where I get to go to our events and I get to see the matches live.
Yeah.
It's just it's such a magical thing to watch, like these folks and like again, that's the power of relationships, the power of mentoring. That's the reason why we do the work that we do at Big Sister. But to see it happening in real life, and like every time I see certain matches, there's something new about their relationship that is just so exciting. And you see like, and it's not only you see the gleam in the eye of the little who's like super excited about like this like new experience, but you also see the joy that it brings the big, right?
Yeah.
And so really, I think the power of mentoring, people always talk about the like outward exports of what the mentor is giving to the mentee, and no one's ever really focusing on what the like there is a mutual like everybody is benefiting from this relationship.
Yeah.
And watching that happen is so great. Like I think of I've been at Big Sister for a little over a year now. And there was a match that was matched within the year that I have been at Big Sister. And I remember when they were like first matched and they like sent out the email about these two were matched, and then fast forward, saw them again once in person, saw a photo of them at an event. They end up coming to our annual gala, and they are the feature of the gala that year. And they talking about the beauty of their relationship. You have someone who is retired and she was convinced that she wouldn't be the right person for Big Sister. And now she has this beautiful relationship with this girl who they're trying new things together. They're reading together, and they're just doing all the things that like just give you a little serotonin boost,
Yes, yeah.
on both ends of the spectrum. Like the little is happy, the big is happy.
That sounds so rewarding. That's a beautiful anecdote. Thank you for sharing that. We have about 5 minutes left, Dominique, and I really have enjoyed talking with you today in our conversation. So in addition to Big Sister Association and the mentoring you do and being involved with Women in Development of Greater Boston, you're also, you have been a lecturer at Northeastern University's College of Professional Studies, and your bio there includes mentioning presenting on effective DEI practices in the fundraising space. I would love to hear a little bit about how you got connected to the College of Professional Studies, and anything you want to share about those DEI practices in that role as a lecturer, please.
Yeah. So I actually am an alum of the program that I was teaching, and I'm taking a little break from teaching. Definitely want to come back because it was really fun getting to like see all the students who are, some of them are new to the development profession, some of them are, in the development profession, but just want to like expand their learning. So there's a range of opportunity in that program. And I I think I did a podcast interview, so maybe this will be the launch of my next teaching course. I did a podcast interview and I was just talking about my experience as a development professional and things that I'm passionate about. And they reached out and like, we would love for you to come back and do this.
Oh.
And I was like, I will, with the caveat of I want to do it the way that I want to do it. Like I will teach to, the curriculum that is there. But one of the things that I always really enjoyed when I was in the program was I had professors who were practitioners. Like my fundraising professor was a fundraiser, right?
Yeah.
She could share practical experiences. And so with a lot of my experiences, I'm always coming at them from a DEI lens, making sure that we're building inclusive spaces, making sure that people feel like they have a seat at the table to talk about what they want to talk about when it comes to their philanthropic efforts. And so I said to the program lead there, I was like, I'm happy to do this, but know that this will be like embedded into like how I'm going to teach this course.
Yes.
And she was perfectly fine with that. She thought it was great. And that's part of the reason why Northeastern uses active practitioners who are, working in fundraising, working in nonprofit marketing to teach these courses. So when I started teaching at Northeastern, I was, again, everyone's going to be like, again, you said you hate events. I was in a events role. I was the associate director of annual giving and special events at YW. And so I would talk about my role as the special events and annual fund person and really talking about how am I making sure that we're bringing up opportunities for everyone who wants to be included.
Sure.
Something as simple as like making sure that we had inclusive practices for the events that we are throwing and making sure that that was always a priority for us. Making sure that we have, we're not just uplifting when we're highlighting our donors. We're not just uplifting our major donors who are able to write a $5,000 check. Also looking at those monthly donors. I love monthly donors.
Yes.
They are your most committed people, quite frankly, if we're being honest. So making sure that they also get some recognition too. And because oftentimes those are your millennials, your folks of color who can't, I mean, not to say that millennials and folks of color cannot write a big check, because I definitely know folks who can.
Yeah.
A lot of folks are not going to be your big check writers. And so you find that they're kind of sitting in those little silos of or buckets of people that aren't getting enough attention, and making sure you're doing things intentionally so that you're going to reach them.
Yeah, I love that. I think that's so important. I became a monthly donor to my dad's alma mater in where Jessica McNeill went, Bridgewater State University. Yeah. And I had never considered that for any organization unless I was working for it. So I work at Weber State and I'm a donor there too. But yeah, I just think there's so much engagement and enthusiasm to support an institution. And it's like, oh yeah, I can give $7 a month or $10 a month, as opposed to writing the big checks you talked about. So yeah, well put. Well, Dominique, before I go, I want to wish you a happy belated birthday. I think
Thank you.
I hope you had a great birthday recently.
I did. And I'm going to continue celebrating for the rest of the month and hopefully end the celebration with a Celtics win.
There you go.
I want banner 18.
I love how you tied that all together. It's so great.
We agreed.
Well, Dominique, this has been such an enjoyable and enthusiastic conversation from you. So I appreciate the preparation you put into conversation and just the energy, the kindness that you shared. And I look forward to staying in touch and seeing how your career progresses. It's been really delightful.
And I am looking forward to seeing you get across the whole map.
Oh,
I'm still thinking of places that you're looking.
I appreciate that. Thank you. So for our audience, you will be able to find Dominique's conversation on LinkedIn and YouTube, the audio and the video portion this summer, as well as the audio only will be on Spotify and podcasts, Podbean website. So thank you for supporting this project, People in Fundraising, with likes and comments. And as Dominique talked about, leads as well. Happy to take any suggestions. And Dominique, I wish you a great rest of your month celebrating and look forward to staying in touch.
Me too.
Awesome. Thank you.